They arrested a homeless man sleeping under a bridge, laughed when he saluted them. Moments later, the governor pulled up and saluted him back. His name was Daniel Cole. Most people in the city didn't know that name. To them, he was just another man under the overpass. One tent, one bedroll, one backpack. But before life wore him down, Sergeant First Class Daniel Cole served 2 tours in Iraq and 1 in Afghanistan. Bronze Star, Purple Heart, honorable discharge. The kind of soldier who didn't talk about what he saw because he couldn't find the words. When he came home, there was no parade, just paperwork, silence, and a country too distracted to notice him fade. His wife had already moved on. His home was gone in months. And by the time anyone realized Daniel was missing, he was already sleeping in the shadows of the freeway. But even there, surrounded by concrete and cold, he held on to something. His routine. Every morning before the sun cracked through the skyline, Daniel would wake, smooth out the wrinkles in his torn jacket, and reach into his duffel for a single Ziploc bag. Inside was an American flag, carefully folded, edges crisp, colors dulled with time. He'd unfold it, stand up straight, and salute. Even if no one was watching, even if no one cared, he kept his boots clean. He kept his space tidy. And though his fingers trembled from old injuries, he always stood tall. The locals who walked past him each day rarely made eye contact. Some thought he was mentally unstable. Others assumed he was a drunk. But not once, did Daniel ask anyone for money. He didn't carry a sign. He didn't hold out his hand. He believed he had already taken too much from this country, and it had already taken more than enough from him. On the morning it happened, Daniel was sitting cross-legged outside his tent, fixing a busted zipper on his pack. A coffee cup, left anonymously by a nurse the night before, steamed beside him. The air was cold. His fingers ached. And then, he heard the crunch of tires. 2 patrol cars pulled up slow, blue lights flashing. Someone had called them. Complaint about an encampment under the freeway. Just another cleanup. Just another statistic. But what they didn't know was who they were about to put in handcuffs. 2 officers stepped out of their patrol cars. Young, confident, not unkind, but detached, like they'd done this a dozen times before. They approached Daniel's tent with that same clipped tone you hear in routine evictions. "Sir, you can't be camped here. You'll need to move on." Daniel stood slowly, not in defiance, not with fear, but with the kind of calm that only comes from years of discipline and silence. His back straightened, his feet aligned, and then, before he said a single word, he raised his hand and saluted. The gesture wasn't sharp. His arm shook. But the salute was real. The officers paused, confused. One of them, younger, with a smirk already forming, tilted his head. "What's that supposed to mean?" Daniel held the salute a second longer, then lowered it. "Sergeant First Class Daniel Cole, United States Army, retired." The smirk turned into a snort. "Right. And I'm General Patton." The other officer stepped forward, glancing down at the small patch on Daniel's jacket. Frayed threads, worn fabric. It looked like surplus, like something from a thrift store rack. To them, it looked like a costume. "You got any ID?" "No, sir. Lost it months ago." "Then we've got to take you in." Daniel didn't argue. He nodded once, turned around slowly, and held out his hands. The cuffs clicked closed. But as they were leading him away, one of the officers kicked something near the tent. A plastic bag tumbled out, and with it, a folded American flag. Corners sharp, edges weathered, and on top, a laminated photograph. A younger Daniel, in full uniform, standing beside a Humvee. One boot crushed the corner of the flag. Daniel winced but said nothing. He just looked at it. the way a man looks at a fallen brother. Then he whispered something under his breath. Respect the cloth, even if they don't respect the man. Someone nearby had started filming. A small crowd had gathered, a few commuters, a man on a bike, a woman walking her dog. You couldn't hear it yet. But the tide was already turning, because less than 2 blocks away, a black SUV had just made a sharp U-turn, and the woman inside was watching that same video on her phone, eyes wide, jaw tight. The governor was on her way. The cuffs had barely clicked shut when a sharp gust of wind blew through the underpass. Then, the low hum of a black SUV pulling up fast, tinted windows, government plates, armed security stepping out first. Everyone turned. The officers paused, still gripping Daniel's arm, and then the back door opened. Out stepped Governor Ellen Ramsey, sharp gray suit, combat boots under the hem of her slacks, ribbons still pinned discreetly on her lapel. A former Army lieutenant colonel. Now, the highest-ranking official in the state. She didn't ask permission. She didn't look confused. She walked straight up to the scene with purpose in every step. Daniel blinked, squinting against the sunlight. Then, in a voice that cracked slightly, he said, "Ma'am!" And just like that, he saluted. The officers looked at each other awkwardly, and then something none of them expected happened. The governor returned the salute, slow, deliberate, eyes never leaving his. For a moment, no one said a word. Then she turned to the officers, her tone calm but unmistakably firm. "Do you know who this man is?" One of them stammered, "Ma'am, we received a complaint. Encampment on public property." She cut him off with a glance. "This man pulled 3 of my soldiers from a burning Humvee in Najaf. He held his position under fire for 4 hours, with a bullet in his thigh." She stepped closer. "You're arresting a soldier for surviving." The younger officer's face flushed. The older one released Daniel's arm, the cuffs suddenly feeling too heavy. The governor knelt and picked up the fallen folded flag from the ground, brushing off the dirt herself. Then she handed it back to Daniel, not as a favor, but as an act of respect. The phones were out now. The bystanders were filming. But no one dared speak. Because sometimes, silence isn't weakness. It's honor. And in that silence, everything changed. Within hours, the footage was everywhere. The video of a homeless veteran being cuffed, and then saluted by the governor herself, spread like wildfire. News anchors called it shocking. Veterans called it disgraceful. The public called it long overdue. But Daniel Cole, he didn't care about the cameras. He sat in the back of the governor's SUV, flag in his lap, staring out the window at a city that hadn't looked at him in years. Across the airwaves, reporters scrambled to piece the puzzle together. Sergeant First Class Daniel Cole served 19 years in the Army, earning the Bronze Star and Purple Heart during his final tour in Iraq. He was honorably discharged, but received little support afterward. According to military records, Cole saved the life of now Governor Ellen Ramsey during an ambush in Najaf in 2006. He disappeared from public record in 2011 after losing his wife to cancer and battling severe PTSD. And then, one headline stood out above the rest: "From homeless to honored, the hero we all forgot." At the press conference the next morning, Governor Ramsey didn't stand behind a podium. She stood next to Daniel, both of them in clean clothes, both of them standing tall. When a reporter asked why she stepped in personally, she answered simply, "Because a man who salutes this country every morning deserves more than handcuffs. He deserves a home. He deserves a name. And it's time this state learns to honor its quiet heroes before the world shames us into it." Behind them, the screen showed a black and white photo of Daniel in uniform, 20 years younger, holding a rifle, eyes fierce. It was a face nobody had noticed. Until now. For the first time in years, Daniel Cole had a bed. Not a bench, not a blanket under an overpass, a real bed in a clean room with folded sheets and a door he could lock. He didn't speak much in those first few days. He never asked for anything. He just sat on the edge of that bed, flag folded beside him, and breathed like it was something new. But outside those walls, his story was changing lives. The governor launched a statewide initiative called Cole's Code, an executive order that banned the arrest of homeless veterans for nonviolent offenses and required local law enforcement to contact veteran outreach services first. Within 72 hours of the press conference, 2 other veterans were pulled from shelters and placed in transitional housing. Over 200 new donors signed up to fund the housing initiative. Volunteers flooded in, asking where they could help, and the governor made one thing clear: if a soldier can carry this country on his back, the least we can do is carry him when he falls. Meanwhile, Daniel started volunteering. At first, just stacking boxes at the outreach center. Quiet, private. But it wasn't long before he was mentoring younger vets, men in their 30s, women fresh out of the service, all facing the same invisible battles he had faced alone for decades. One day, a young Marine asked him, "How did you survive out there all those years?" Daniel thought for a long moment. Then he pointed at the folded flag on the shelf beside him. "That's how. Every day I looked at that and remembered who I was." And for the first time since his discharge, he believed it again. 1 year later, on a crisp November morning, a crowd gathered at the state capitol. Veterans stood shoulder to shoulder. Politicians, school children, news crews, all there to witness something more powerful than any speech. At the center of the ceremony stood Daniel Cole. He didn't wear dress blues. He never got them reissued. Instead, he wore the same jacket he'd worn that morning under the bridge. Cleaned, repaired, and now pinned with the medals the world had once forgotten. The governor stood beside him as the new plaque was unveiled, dedicated to Sergeant First Class Daniel Cole, a soldier who served in silence and reminded us all what honor really looks like. Daniel didn't speak much that day. He didn't need to. But before he stepped down from the podium, he unfolded the flag, the same one he'd kept in a Ziploc bag through rain, frost, and years of being invisible. He raised it in the morning breeze and saluted. And this time, he wasn't alone. Every person in the crowd, civilian and soldier alike, followed his lead. 1,000 salutes. No laughter. No cuffs. Just respect. Returned. And as Daniel stepped back into the crowd, a little boy near the front asked his mother, "Is he famous?" She smiled. "No, sweetheart. He's something better. He's remembered." Daniel Cole didn't ask for help. He didn't chase attention. But when respect finally came for him, it wore boots, not a camera crew. What would you have done if you saw him in cuffs that day? Let us know in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe for more powerful stories of quiet heroes, second chances, and dignity rediscovered, right here on Stories Unfolded.